Chapter 471, Taming the Gold 3 Ring. Xiao noticed movement. At first he thought they were shadows cast by the massive trunks, but soon he realized that the dark shapes sliding between the branches were something much more alive. The former predators, he murmured, watching how a large feline creature moved gracefully through the bark of one of the giant trees. The creature he was now studying had been, in previous rings, one of the dominant predators, a royal shadow cat of gold 3 rank. But now, in this transformed ecosystem, it had become something very different. They adapted. It was apparently thinner than its relatives from lesser rings, or at least had much less fluffy fur, its muscles redesigned for climbing. Its claws had developed specialized hooks that allowed it to adhere to the smooth bark of the giant trees, and its eyes had evolved bigger to detect the mana fluctuations that indicated when a fruit was ripe for harvest. The adaptation was remarkable to observe. Thieves, Xiao realized. They became mana thieves. The observation was fascinating. These predators, unable to grow at the same rate as their prey, had developed a completely new strategy, stealing the mana accumulation organs that the trees used to continue their evolution. The shadow cat he was observing approached by stealthily climbing to one of the golden fruits, its movements slow and precise. Xiao could see how the creature evaluated the maturity of the organ by moving its nose and whiskers. The process was methodical. The cat seemed to listen to subtle vibrations. It seemed to be ready. The creature bristled its back and raised its ears, waiting for the perfect moment to attack. When it finally lunged, it did so with a speed that barely registered in Xiao's enhanced vision. Its claws sank into the fruit's surface, piercing the hard shell that protected it. The liquid mana inside spurted out like golden blood, and the cat drank avidly before the tree could react. But they were delusions of a creature intoxicated to excess. The tree did react. The roar that erupted from the massive trunk made the ground vibrate under Xiao's feet, and he felt the paralyzing effect wash over him. Damn! Xiao threw himself to the ground instinctively, his camouflage raptor struggling to maintain active camouflage. The sensation was overwhelming, a combination of infrasonic waves and mana displacement that seemed designed to freeze the thieves in place. Xiao's enhanced senses made the effect even more pronounced, his nervous system flooded with signals that screamed from every direction. The appendages of the giant tree moved with speed that belied their size, long pincers that cut through the air where the shadow cat had been seconds before. The feline creature jumped and twisted, using its enhanced agility to dodge the attacks. But Xiao could see that the exchange was far from one-sided. The cat's movements had become more erratic, less precise. The stolen mana was affecting its coordination, making it drunk on power it couldn't properly process. The trees learned to hunt, he murmured, fascinated by the battle unfolding above his head. The tree wasn't just defending itself. It was also using its fruits as bait. Once trapped, other royal golden noses joined the network to tear their prey apart. The coordination was terrifying to witness. What had appeared to be individual trees revealed themselves as part of a vast, interconnected society. Xiao watched as one of the mana organs from another tree deliberately swelled, pulsing with more intense light to attract the attention of another thief. The strategy was diabolical in its simplicity. Create irresistible temptation, wait for the inevitable attempt at theft, then coordinate a response that would eliminate the threat while providing fresh nutrients for the collective. An ecosystem of constant predation, Xiao realized. This place was much more dangerous than he had anticipated. While Xiao remembered his journey in Gold Ring 3, a group was experiencing the same level of mana in a completely different place. The ascent through the abyssal depths had been brutal, but not in the way Hagen had expected. Still can't believe how much you've changed, he muttered, watching Bloodwind move through the tunnels with grace that made even the darkness seem to recoil. Bloodwind's transformation was insane, the enhanced corruption flowing through him like liquid gold. His movements had gained an otherworldly fluidity, as if he were walking through a world that bent to accommodate his presence. The massive enhancement potion had done more than increase his power. It seemed to have fundamentally altered his relationship with the abyss itself. "Power has its own momentum," Bloodwind replied, his voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate through the stone itself. "You adapt or you break." The journey upward had tested that principle repeatedly. At the Gold Ring 3-level depth, they had encountered something that they had thought to have found before, a true deep leviathan worm. The creature had emerged from the tunnel walls like a living avalanche of flesh, its segmented body stretching beyond the reach of their eyes. Each segment was larger than a house, covered in chitinous plates that gleamed with accumulated mana crystals of high density. Hagen had felt his heart stop when a monster's roar shook him from the ceiling, a sound that seemed to originate from the depths of the earth itself. "This is it," he had whispered, preparing for the kind of death that would leave nothing behind to remember him by. But Bloodwind had smiled. The fusion that followed was unlike anything Hagen had witnessed. 3 of Bloodwind's absorption beasts merged with him simultaneously, creating something that could only be described as a true vampire made manifest. His form had elongated and darkened, sprouting additional limbs that ended in crystalline red claws designed for piercing and draining. The battle, if it could be called that, had lasted less than 2 minutes. Bloodwind had moved like liquid shadow, directing the Leviathan's crushing attacks with supernatural grace, while his claws found purchase in the gaps between its armored segments. Each touch had drained massive amounts of the creature's vitality and mana, the stolen energy flowing into Bloodwind with visible streams of light. The enormous beast had fought desperately, its death throes shaking the entire tunnel system. But its struggles had only accelerated the draining process, each movement pumping more of its life force into Bloodwind's waiting claws. In the end, only the carcass remained, a hollow shell that would feed the smaller scavengers that managed to climb the new abyss for months to come. "Tasty," Bloodwind had commented, his voice carrying a resonance that made Hagen's skin crawl. Now, as they finally emerged from the depths, Hagen couldn't shake the feeling that he was traveling with something that had transcended normal classifications of humans. Chapter 472, Taming the Golden Light. After the Gold 3 depth, everything else had been quite easy. When they broke through to the surface, the first thing that struck Hagen was the silence. "Where are we exactly?" Bloodwind asked, his enhanced senses scanning the horizon. Hagen consulted his mental map, cross-referencing their emergence point with the landmarks he could see through the near forest and the plains. Near the edge of the Iron Forest at the end of Goldcrest territory, he admitted with slight embarrassment. The war had indeed emptied this area, where normally there would be patrols, border guards, or at least some signs of human habitation. Now there were only the natural sounds of the forest. They had emerged quite near Ren's old house, but they didn't know it. "The new abyssal formations confused my navigation more than I expected, but we're not too far off course. But you, the best explorer, got lost down there," Bloodwind finished, though his tone carried amusement rather than anger. "The underground ecosystem changed completely," Hagen defended himself. "Those standardized creatures we encountered, it's like they invaded the entire Deep's network. My old reference points, they're all useless now." It was true. In years of underground travel, Hagen had never encountered such big changes to the abyssal environment. Such widespread transformation made him wonder what other modifications were occurring in other territories. The thought was deeply unsettling. If the abyss itself was being restructured on such a massive scale, what other changes were occurring in places no one had thought to explore? Bloodwind seemed unconcerned by the navigation error. If anything, he appeared pleased by their current location. "Actually, this is fine," he mused, his eyes scanning the forest. "We are still close, and not emerging directly in the infected zone means fewer surprises." They moved deeper into the forest. Bloodwind's corruption seemed to intimidate the forest creatures, creating a bubble of unnatural quiet around their advance. The trees here were almost normal, with very little mana. Under normal circumstances, it would have been a relaxed trip, But Bloodwind suddenly went rigid, his head tilting as if feeling something. "What do you sense?" Hagen asked, immediately alert to the change in his companion's demeanor. The question hung in the air for several seconds before Bloodwind responded, his voice carrying a note of cautious worry. "Yano King," he said finally, "still at the castle, doing something weird with his energy, but can you tell if he's coming for us?" Hagen pressed, anxiety creeping into his voice. Bloodwind was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful as he processed the information his senses were providing. "Doesn't seem to be moving from what I can tell." "Why?" "Hard to say," he admitted. "Either our forces are well matched enough that he's not confident about winning now, or—" He paused, his frown deepening. "Or he doesn't want to leave the castle alone to attack us because of our King Colioran's mana signature. I can sense it too, even from here." The risks seemed significant for Yano. If Dragarian decided to come, Colioran could take the castle and enter the door under it. So Yano's king was being forced to remain at the castle due to the presence of two powerful forces in different directions. It created a window of opportunity that might not last long. Perhaps Dragarian was even thinking that was exactly Yano's strategy, to make him come out by dividing their forces. But it also suggested that the balance of power was more unclear than they had assumed. How strong was the king if he decided to wait for them to 1 versus 2 him in the castle instead of attacking now? Though the truth was that Dragarian was dead tired and they were the ones losing a great chance. Either way, Bloodwind continued, it works in our favor that he's not coming to stop us from completing the mission. They continued their advance through the forest. Finally, they reached it. The claw-shaped tree stood exactly as described by the survivors, its twisted form unmistakable against the forest backdrop. The ancient oak's branches stretched like gnarled fingers covered in tons of golden dots. All around it, pulsing gently between the twisted branches and roots, was their objective, the light of the world dragon. Every mushroom was smaller than Hagen had expected, no larger than a child's fist, but the power emanating from them was unmistakable. The sight was beautiful and deeply unsettling. The mushrooms created patterns of light that seemed to dance in rhythm with some unheard music, their golden glow casting everything in warm, inviting radiance that somehow felt wrong. Finally, Bloodwind breathed the disgusting smell, his enhanced senses analyzing the pulsing light that emanated from the countless mushrooms scattered throughout the forest floor. "The infamous world dragon's light, named by the princess," Hagen murmured, remembering. "Though it looks to me more like infection," Bloodwind finished. "It's spreading slowly, but always following the bigger mana concentrations." Look, the vampire was right. The mushrooms weren't randomly distributed. They followed clear expansion routes, consuming whatever crossed their advance and leaving behind more of their kind. The first infected zone stretched in a rough circle around the ancient oak, with tendrils of golden fungi reaching toward the iron ring boundary. "They're barely entering the silver ring, according to the reports," observed one of the 15 remaining soldiers. "We're ahead of schedule." Bloodwind nodded, but his expression remained cautious. "Easy to eliminate, according to the briefing. We'll see about that." As they approached the infected zone, Hagen felt an immediate and visceral reaction. His skin crawled with revulsion, as if every cell in his body was screaming warnings. The abyssal energy that flowed through him seemed to recoil from the golden light, creating an internal conflict that made him nauseous. The sensation was like trying to force two opposing magnets together, his corruption-enhanced biology rejecting the purifying influence of the light aggressively. "Anyone else feeling that?" he asked, noting similar expressions of discomfort on his companions' faces. "Like oil and water," muttered another soldier, his beast trembling anxiously at his side before immediately retreating back into fusion. "My beast doesn't want to get close." Bloodwind seemed less affected, but even he maintained a respectful distance from the mushroom perimeter. Hagen remembered Selfia's warnings about the light, her instructions to avoid direct contact. "We activate the crystals from here," he announced, pulling out the remaining corruption crystals from his pack, those that they hadn't lost in Dragarian's involuntary attack. No need to get closer than necessary. The other soldiers followed suit. The abyssal artifacts hummed with purple energy, eager to fulfill their purpose. The activation was simultaneous and a bit dramatic. 10 corruption crystals erupted with dark light, their combined energy creating a beacon that pierced through the dirt. The call went out into the abyss. The response was immediate. Deep below, something stirred. The ground began to vibrate with a strength that spoke of massive movement, of countless forms answering the summons. "They're coming," he announced unnecessarily as the tremors intensified. "Good," Bloodwind smiled, his fangs gleaming in the crystalline light. "But while we wait," he gestured toward the mushroom-covered clearing, where the claw-shaped tree stood like a gnarled monument. "I think we can make some progress on our own." Chapter 473, Taming the Golden Light, 2. Bloodwind's corruption manifested like storm. 3 out of his 6 beasts fused with him simultaneously. Dark wings spread from his back while his hands grew elongated claws designed for more than simple combat. The absorbed power from the deep Leviathan worm flowed through him, and when he released it, the very air seemed to recoil. The corruption struck the mushroom field like a tidal wave of darkness. Where the golden fungi had pulsed with gentle light, now there was only withering shadow. The creatures of light dissolved on contact, their radiance extinguished as if they had never existed. The mana they had consumed was canceled by the one in the darkness, leaving behind only scorched earth. "Effective," Hagen commented, watching the destruction. But as the corruption cleared the field, something unexpected happened. The claw-shaped tree, which had been fully covered in the golden mushrooms, didn't lose all of them. Instead, the remaining fungi began to glow with higher intensity, their light becoming so bright it was painful to observe directly. And then the claw closed. The gnarled branches, which had been spread wide like an open hand, contracted. The movement was smooth and purposeful, clearly the action of something alive rather than the random falling of a dying plant. "That's not a tree," Hagen said. "No," Bloodwind agreed, his enhanced senses analyzing the structure with growing interest. "It's clearly not." The vampire spread his wings and launched into the air, his vulture vampire beast granting him aerial view. Wind gathered around him as he channeled his beast power, creating a focused tornado that struck the closed claw with devastating force. The structure was torn from the ground with a sound like a mountain breaking. What emerged from the earth remained neither a tree nor a hand. The claw was connected to a massive sphere buried deep in the soil, its surface covered in the same golden mushrooms that had been spreading through the forest floor. But where the fungi on the ground had been destroyed by Bloodwind's corruption, these seemed to draw power from the sphere itself. "Impossible," Bloodwind muttered, studying the structure with worry and new respect. "Nothing in this ring should have accumulated so much mana to resist my power." The sphere pulsed with energy. This wasn't a natural formation, it was something that had been growing, accumulating power for decades, perhaps centuries. Unless it's been here for a very long time, Hagen realized, pieces falling into place. The closed claw began to move again, this time with clear hostile intent. Spores erupted from its surface, creating a cloud of golden particles that drifted toward the soldiers. "Scatter!" Hagen shouted, his survival instincts overriding his fascination. The battle that followed was weird and unlike anything Hagen had experienced. The claw-arm sphere moved with intelligence, its defense and attacks powerful. Each time Bloodwind struck it with corruption or wind, it resisted, learning from the assault and adjusting its next attacks accordingly. "It's studying us," Bloodwind growled, pulling back from another failed attack. The sphere's surface had changed, becoming more resistant to corruption with each exchange. The golden mushrooms that covered it seemed to block the dark energy and convert it into common mana, which was absorbed and made the structure glow even brighter. "Fire," Bloodwind decided, his form shifting as he channeled different aspects of his beast's power. "Let's see how it handles that." The flames that erupted were tinged with purple abyssal energy, burning with heat that should have reduced the strongest metal. But when the fire struck, the arm sphere simply resisted it. "Damn things feeding on our attacks," one of the soldiers observed, his voice tight with panic. The claw launched itself forward again, moving with speed that belied its size. This time, however, it was met by something else entirely. The ground erupted. Abyssal creatures poured from newly opened tunnels like a living flood, their forms twisted by their corrupted evolution in the false golden depths. They moved with a single-minded purpose, drawn by the corruption crystals and driven by a rule that transcended normal understanding. The golden mushrooms and the abyssal creatures met in a collision that defied the laws of this world's nature. Where they touched, both simply ceased to exist. The fungi dissolved on contact with abyssal energy, while the creatures were consumed by the purifying light. It was a mutual annihilation on a scale that made the previous battle seem like a minor starting skirmish. The clawsphere found itself surrounded by a tide of corrupted bodies, its surface being stripped of protective mushrooms as wave after wave of abyssal creatures threw themselves against it. The structure fought back, trying to emerge, but its enemies were too many. "Beautiful," Bloodwind breathed, watching the mutual destruction. "They're perfect counters for each other, the ultimate enemies." When the light hegemony finally ended, the landscape had been transformed. The golden mushrooms were gone, consumed by the abyssal tide. The creatures themselves had continued their suicidal advance toward the bronze and silver rings, following their programming to destroy till the last golden mushroom. The first battlefield was now empty except for the soldiers and their quarry. The clawarm sphere stood naked and motionless, its surface no longer covered by the protective fungi. Without the mushrooms, it appeared to be just another large rockwood formation, albeit one with an unusual shape. "Is it dead?" asked one of the soldiers, his voice hopeful but uncertain. Bloodwind approached cautiously, his enhanced senses analyzing the structure. "Dormant, maybe? Or waiting to get mana again." That's when Hagen noticed the tunnel. Where the sphere had been buried, the abyssal creatures had revealed an opening in the earth. The tunnel end was clearly artificial, carved from living rock with smoothness that spoke of intelligent design. And from its depths came a faint glow that may have something to do with golden mushrooms. "There's more to do down there," Hagen announced, his explorer's instincts overriding his caution. "Something the abyssals are still following." Bloodwind smiled delighted. "An underground infection route that may take us to the heart. How convenient." He turned to Hagen with an expression of inquiry and invitation. "Want to explore the source?" Hagen grinned back, feeling the familiar thrill of discovery that had driven him to become the kingdom's premier underground explorer. "Thought you'd never ask." Xiao almost died. Chapter 474, Taming Opportunism. Xiao barely had time to process the massive shadow plummeting from the heights before his survival instincts launched him into a desperate flutter to one side. Death brushed past his left shoulder. The body of the cat bear, an enormous creature 20 meters tall, crashed into the ground with an impact that made the earth tremble. "Damned cursed luck," hissed Xiao, canceling his silent flight while moving away from the crater the creature had created. The massive feline rose slowly, golden blood dripping from multiple wounds. The marks of pincers and perforations in its fur told the story of the recent lost encounter against the hunting trees. It had escaped, but barely. The wounds were showing a desperate struggle. Deep gouges where the trees' specialized appendages and massive claws had found purchase. Puncture wounds and patches of missing fur where the sharp beaks had pierced through its natural armor. This was a predator that had learned the hard way about the price of overconfidence. The giants above didn't move to pursue. Their beaks couldn't reach all the way down anyway. Xiao could see their imposing forms remaining erect, conserving energy thanks to their structure adapted for upright rest. The cost of moving from place to place with that enormous mass was astronomical, so they only did it when absolutely necessary. Their patience was a method of hunting and living. Why waste energy chasing prey when greed for the forbidden fruit would eventually deliver it to them anyway? The forest had become a vertical killing field where the trees held almost all the advantages. But the giants weren't his immediate problem. The wounded cat bear growled, especially annoyed by the pain and loss. Its eyes, normally sharp as blades, moved erratically, seeking something to take its frustration out on. The bark of the enormous trunk became its outlet for a moment first. Massive claws raked furrows in the surface, each swipe carving trenches deep enough for a man to hide in. The display of raw power was both impressive and deeply concerning for anyone small or weak enough to become a target for such rage. Xiao reactivated his low-profile silent flight, luckily in time, using his missed owl's ability to glide away from the grumpy cat without making noise. It was then that, distracted by the enormous feline bear's tantrum, he touched something he didn't realize was there. The root, wrapped around the trunk, felt like flesh, moist and pulsing. Xiao realized his mistake the same instant the thing coiled around his arm to trap him with enormous constrictor force. It wasn't a root. It was more like a tentacle, a feeding vine, part of something much larger and hungrier. Golden carrion sprout, he cursed, immediately recognizing the trap he had fallen into. The carrion plants were enormous flattened formations that lived under the extremely compact earth, adapted with bodies adapted to the enormous pressure of the creatures above them. They were like giant plates waiting for food to fall from the tops. Their roots were actually also sensory organs that extended toward the tree trunks, feeling the vibrations of the cat bears climbing. Flat as dinner plates, but spread across acres of underground territory, they had transformed themselves into living safety nets for the deadly game playing out in the canopy above. They were constantly waiting for the result of the deadly game above. When a thief fell, whether dying or in pieces, they were ready to drag it toward their digestive mouths. A complete corpse or a half-eaten fruit were the best prizes, but any piece would do. The tentacle interpreted Xiao's presence precisely as a piece of the cat bear that had just fallen nearby, perhaps a fragment torn apart by the tree's claws. The suction force increased, trying to drag him toward the main mouth hidden under the earth. The pulling sensation was terrible, like being grabbed by a giant underwater current. Xiao could feel the creature's digestive anticipation through the tentacle, its biological systems already preparing to process what it assumed was fresh meat. Not like this. Xiao growled, his instincts activating. 3 feathers materialized in his free hand, each glowing with maximum energy. He launched them in rapid sequence, each projectile finding its mark at the junction where the tentacle connected to the main root system. It wasn't very high damage, since Xiao was almost a full rank below, but thanks to being a double and his high precision, the small damage hit the precise points to multiply the effect. His missed owl's eyes allowed him to see the tiny gaps in the creature's armor, the vulnerable connection points where nervous tissue clustered near the surface. The carrion sprout reacted immediately, its tentacles writhing in pain as the disruptive sensation interfered with its nervous system. The pressure on Xiao's wrist loosened enough for him to break free. Without wasting time, he activated his flight to the maximum again, spending energy reserves he preferred to conserve. The air became his ally as he rose away from the reach of the tentacles that now thrashed furiously, searching for the food they had lost on the surface. But he had lost stealth again. The attack with the feathers had created flashes of light that cut through the dense air like beacons in the night. And this time something had noticed them. Xiao felt the change in the environment before seeing it, a presence moving with impossible grace jumping between the tree trunks. His enhanced senses caught the distinctive pattern, black and white spots moving behind him. The movement was different from the previous wounded cat bear's desperate thrashing. This was a different beast inside the same body, purposeful, the approach of a predator that had chosen its target and was now closing in with its fastest jumps. "The damned cat bear saw me," he murmured, his heart sinking. Now the camouflage or the silent flight wouldn't work against the beast-activated mana eyes. The cats were playful. It might sound cute, but with gold rank 3 creatures that had developed a pathological obsession with anything that moved or shone. They didn't hunt anything other than fruits for evolutionary hunger. They pursued any other things for entertainment. And once something caught their attention, they didn't stop until it ceased to be fun. Chapter 475, Taming Opportunism, 2. These weren't the jumps of a desperate predator driven by hunger or territorial instinct that was behind Xiao. They were those from apex predators with too much time and power. They had moved into the realm of recreational violence. The feline appeared in his peripheral vision, moving from trunk to trunk with speed that seemed impossible for its size. Xiao didn't stay to see how interested the creature was in him. He flew. The long flight that followed was a nightmare of speed and terror. The playful cat wasn't just fast, it was intelligent. It anticipated Xiao's movements, cutting angles, and using the positioning of the forest trees to shorten distances. Each leap covered impossible long distances, the creature's enhanced musculature allowing it to treat the massive trunks like stepping stones. Its claws found purchase on surfaces that should have been too smooth to grip, and its reflexes expected Xiao's evasive maneuvers with uncanny accuracy. Think, he told himself while navigating between the giants, each maneuver consuming more mana. What would make it lose interest? His enhanced eyes provided constant information, pursuer speed, movement patterns, possible escape routes. But it all came down to one simple reality. He couldn't maintain this pace for much longer. He had to flutter as hard as possible. Silent fly, relaxed tempo, and speed was out of question. The cat bear had reserves of power that dwarfed his own, and it meant it could maintain this play pursuit much longer. For it, this was entertainment. For him, it was a death sentence being slowly executed. The playful cat emitted a sound that was part purr, part laughter, the sound of a predator having fun with its toy. After several minutes of pursuit, a clearing appeared like an oasis in the middle of the nightmare. Perhaps here the cat bear couldn't jump so easily to follow him. Xiao launched himself toward the open space, his lungs burning from the sustained effort of flapping with everything he had. Only when he was halfway across did he realize what he had found. The body of a massive royal golden nose lay in the center of the clearing. Its form so immense it had created its own ecosystem in death. The trunks, because that's what most of its body was, extended for hundreds of meters, creating a natural open space. The scale was staggering. This hadn't just been a large creature. It had been a living mountain, a being whose death had reshaped the local geography. The clearing existed solely because nothing could grow in the shadow of its massive canopy when it was standing. But the body wasn't alone. Carrion sprouts surrounded the corpse like voracious satellites, their flattened forms invisible beneath the surface. They had been feeding on the dead giant for who knows how long. The feeding frenzy was a rare spectacle. Xiao could see the patterns in the disturbed earth, the way the carrion plants had positioned themselves to maximize their access to different parts of the corpse. And on top of the massive trunk, something grew that made Xiao rejoice. Dark blue-green grass covered the upper surface of the corpse like a thick mantle. The smell emanating from it was distinctive, medicinal, but intense. Medicine for mana excess, he whispered, disbelief filling his voice. Highest quality. Behind him, the playful cat stopped at the edge of the clearing, its nostrils dilating as it processed the smells. Its expression changed instantly from amusement to evident disgust. Its fur bristled, and it backed away several meters. It doesn't like the smell, Xiao realized, a smile touching his lips for the first time in hours. Now, relatively safe, and with time to finish analyzing the place thoroughly, he saw it. In the center of everything, piercing the massive trunk like a spear that had penetrated a shield, rose a black and dry tree. Its branches extended like a withered claw, barely rising above the giant corpse. The sight was surreal and somehow ominous. The dead tree looked ancient beyond measure, its bark blackened not by fire, but by time and exposure to forces that had drained all life from its structure. Xiao flew toward the center of the corpse, the island between the sprouts and the forest, recognizing the opportunity to rest above. The dead giant tree offered a safe landing point. And the medicinal grass. Maybe my anti-mana supply problem isn't as serious as I thought, he murmured, landing on a solid branch of the small black claw tree. The giant cat circled the perimeter of the clearing, clearly frustrated by the loss of its toy, but reluctant to approach due to the penetrating smell of the medicinal grass. The creature paced back and forth like a caged animal, occasionally making feints toward the clearing only to retreat when the medicinal odors became too intense. For the first time since he had begun this suicidal mission, Xiao allowed himself a moment of rest. The claw tree was more solid than it appeared. Xiao settled into a stable fork, his senses analyzing his new refuge. The matter of the hand, emerging from the corpse, seemed completely dead, but its structure remained intact. There was something unnatural about the way it had been preserved, and if it was that old, how had it crossed the body of such an enormous giant without damage? The preservation was too perfect, too complete. Normal wood or rock would have been flattened by the giant body. "What killed you too?" he murmured. The playful cat had found an elevated position on a trunk from where it could observe, its eyes fixed on Xiao with a patience that was more disturbing than its previous pursuit. The creature knew he would eventually have to move, and when he did. But for now, Xiao had time to evaluate his situation. The medicinal grass was more abundant than he had ever seen in any one place. Thick, juicy leaves that practically radiated healing potency. If he could process even a fraction of this, the quality was exceptional, far superior to anything he could have purchased in the city. The grass had been feeding on the nutrients from a creature of incredible power, concentrating and refining those energies into pure medicinal essence. I could make it to the platinum rings and back, he told himself, mentally calculating the doses he would need. Xiao began planning his next move, aware that the playful cat was still waiting, aware that the time he could hold out was limited, but for the first time since he had left the king's empty cave, feeling that maybe, just maybe, he had a real chance of success. Chapter 476, Little Tamer Doctor. The small mana crystals had finally disappeared completely from Ren's mana vision. He observed with satisfaction how the last crystallized fragments dissolved in Xiao's circulatory system, converted back to their semi-ethereal state and absorbed by the processed tentacles. The professor lay more relaxed now, his breathing less labored, the lines of tension in his face gradually softening. The transformation was remarkable. Where before Xiao's mana channels had been clouded with crystalline obstructions, now they flowed with unbelievable ease. Each dissolved fragment represented another step back from the brink of death. Phase 2, Ren murmured, wiping his hands before reaching for the transparent gel they had obtained from amphibian tissues. "Are you sure you know what you're doing with those tissues from another species?" asked one of the experts for the third time, his voice tense with concern as he felt the internal changes with his Venus's roots and observed the kid working. Ren didn't look away from his patient. "Yes, and even if he had any adverse or hypersensitive reaction, we would just need to heal it in real time. I need to keep his mana pathways covered while the healers work. If more crystals form while we're repairing the damage, the first step won't have served any purpose." The crystallization process that had nearly killed Xiao would continue unless they could create barriers to prevent reformation. It would be like repairing a ship while it's sinking, Leora understood, her decent comprehension of the process surprising the doctors who felt they had forgotten and underestimated what it was to be children of that age. The medical expert with the parasitic Venus observed with growing fascination the patient's interior, while Ren injected the adaptable gel with the help of water elementals. The process required the utmost care. Each injection had to be placed just on top of the mana circulatory system, creating a protective matrix around the mana channels to help with the natural healing processes. "The micro-wounds are really sealing," he murmured, disbelief evident in his voice. "And there's no adverse reaction. It's not even scarring. It's actually regenerating slowly, as if the gel were providing scaffolding for the original system to rebuild itself." Ren kept working without taking his eyes off his task. His concentration was absolute, as if he were reading invisible instructions and executing them without doubt. His hands moved with firm confidence, each application of the gel calculated to the millimeter. The healers worked in shifts around the table, keeping Xiao's vital system stable while Ren performed the more delicate work. 3 had already had to be replaced due to mana exhaustion, but the progress was undeniable. His mana circulation is improving, reported the second expert, the man with the leech bee. Toxicity levels are also gradually decreasing. Julius exchanged a look of relief with Luna and Leora. It seemed he really might survive. The transformation was visible even to untrained eyes. Xiao's skin, which had been taking on an unhealthy pallor from the mana poisoning, was slowly returning to its normal color. His breathing, previously shallow and labored, was becoming deeper and more regular. Dragarian observed the scene from his position by the wall, a smile playing on his tired lips. Better than expected, he murmured, his eyes analyzing not only Ren's work, but the broader implications. Maybe too much better. Father, Julius approached, noticing the king's thoughtful expression. You should rest. I notice you're dimmed, and we don't know how much longer this is going to take. Dragarian waved a hand distractedly. I want to see how this ends. There was something in his expression that Julius couldn't completely decipher. A combination of approval, curiosity, and something that might have been worry. The look was somewhat familiar, the same expression Dragarian wore when he was evaluating new travels. What are you thinking about? Julius asked, recognizing or maybe remembering that particular look. Dragarian smiled more widely, but the fatigue was still evident in his eyes. Oh, just some possibilities. His pause was significant. I wonder what else he might know. Julius frowned, but before he could ask more, Ren's voice cut through the room. I need you to keep your healing system stable and localized for the next 10 minutes, he instructed the healers. I'm going to absorb the last mana residues from the system, and there can't be any fluctuations. The medical experts concentrated harder, fascinated by the level of precision he was demonstrating. In the depths of Xiao's unconsciousness, memories continued to unfold. The clearing had been a temporary refuge, but Xiao knew he couldn't stay indefinitely. The playful cat continued prowling the perimeter, and although the medicinal grass's smell kept it at a distance, Xiao feared it might get used to it. He had worked methodically, processing the medicinal leaves with the scarce resources he had. Luckily, he didn't need much. The flasks he carried already contained the necessary residual fermentation agents, and the plants at his disposal were of excellent quality. He only required squeezing the leaves and mixing the extract with the residue from the flasks. The work was even meditative in its simplicity. Each leaf had to be squeezed at exactly the right strength, where the medicinal compounds were at their best concentration. Too low, and the potency suffered. Too hard, and that bitterness crept in the one that could cause adverse reactions. A few days of fermentation, and they'll be ready to refill what I was missing for the platinum rings, he murmured while working, his eyes occasionally directed toward the claw tree rising from the giant corpse. The structure intrigued him. There was something unnatural about the way the wood had been preserved, as if it had been instantly petrified. He had touched the surface searching for clues, but the material was as hard as the densest mana crystals and revealed none of its secrets. "What are you?" he had murmured, running his fingers over the twisted branches. The tree remained silent, guarding its mysteries. After a day of work and restless rest, always alert for the playful cat that continued watching, Xiao had made his decision. The claw could wait. His mission couldn't. The king might be in trouble out there, he had told himself while packing his backpack filled to the maximum with new medicinal supplies. The playful cat had lost interest in Xiao for one crucial moment. Its attention had shifted toward something moving at the opposite edge of the clearing. Perhaps some smaller inhabitant of the Gold 3 forest that had had the misfortune to catch its attention. Whatever it was, it gave Xiao the opportunity he needed. With stealth activated to the maximum, he glided from the claw tree toward the opposite side of the clearing. His movements were ghostly, each feather of his mist owl working to absorb sound and blur his presence. The technique required perfect coordination between his beast's abilities and his own movements. Each step had to be placed precisely, each breath controlled, each shift in weight calculated to avoid creating vibrations that might alert the predator. It shouldn't be far now, he thought mentally, not daring to even whisper. The edge of the third golden ring was approaching. Xiao could feel it in the air, a subtle change in pressure, in mana density, in the very quality of light. Based on the principle of almost linear increase in ring size, he shouldn't be far from platinum territory. He was right. The frontier appeared before him like an invisible but undeniable line due to the difference in its ecological composition. The air on the other side shimmered with a faint platinum glow, and the mana concentration increased noticeably. The first platinum ring, he whispered, feeling both terror and triumph. It was then that he heard the low roar behind him. The playful cat had noticed his absence. Xiao didn't bother looking back. The sound approaching was unmistakable. Enormous paws striking trunks in a rhythm that was accelerating. The sharp, shrill growl of a feline predator that had found its prey, trying to escape. This wasn't just play pursuit anymore. It was personal. "Damn you fat, sadistic beast," he hissed, abandoning all pretense of stealth again. He flew at full speed toward the platinum frontier, his muscles burning as he pushed his flight beyond its limits. The roar was getting closer. Xiao could almost feel the playful cat's hot breath on his neck, imaginary but terrifyingly real in his mind. "Come on, come on, come on," he urged himself, every fiber of his being concentrated on reaching the frontier. The platinum line was approaching. 50 meters. 30. 20. Claws whistled centimeters from his back. 10 meters. 5. Xiao crossed the platinum ring frontier at the same instant that the playful cat's claws brushed the air where he had been a second before. For a moment, Xiao thought he had escaped. Trees to jump were very scarce here. The platinum air enveloped him like a heavy blanket. His breathing became labored immediately, and he had to force his mana system to avoid energy overload in his veins. The sensation was overwhelming. This wasn't just increased mana density. This was like breathing liquid power. Every breath threatened to flood his system with more energy than it could safely process. But the frustrated roar behind him didn't stop at the frontier. "No, no, no," Xiao murmured, turning to see the playful cat cross the line, jumping from the last tree with obstinate determination. The creature staggered momentarily when landing in the ground when the dense mana hit it, but its obsession with Xiao overcame any discomfort. Its black and white spots became brighter in the energy-charged environment, and its eyes fixed on Xiao never lost their focus. The persistence was terrifying. This wasn't rational predator behavior. This was obsession beyond the bounds of normal bee psychology. Exactly as the footprints next to the kings had suggested, Xiao realized with growing horror. Cats don't always respect boundaries. Chapter 477, Taming the Platinum Ring. The playful cat roared again, a sound that now had strange echoes in the dense air of the platinum ring. Each step it took toward Xiao sent massive vibrations through the ground in this new environment. Xiao maintained his desperate flight, but now struggled against the growing pressure of mana. Behind him, the giant bear cat accelerated, its body also gradually adapting to the new territory. But the powerful vibrations it sent through the ground were impossible to hide, and something had noticed them. The ground trembled with a different rhythm. These weren't the heavy steps of the playful cat. This was something emerging from below, multiple presences moving beneath the surface. Xiao felt the change in mana before seeing it. Energy networks activating, underground communication systems lighting up like a giant neural network. The response was almost immediate, like disturbing a sleeping giant that had sensors scattered across miles of territory. The very earth seemed to come alive, awakening to deal with the intrusion. "Local inhabitants," he murmured, comprehension and terror mixing in his voice. The ground beneath the playful cat opened. Massive tentacles, thick as common tree trunks, emerged from the surface like plant serpents awakening from deep sleep. But these weren't the carrion sprouts he had encountered in the Golden Ring. These were something evolved, refined, perfected by evolutionary pressure. Planet network sprouts. The scavengers became predators, Xiao whispered, fascinated despite the danger. The tentacles moved with greater intelligence, not just as reactive plants, but as patient hunters waiting in their traps. They coiled around the playful cat's paws before the creature could react, and when the feline tried to jump to escape, it realized that those annoying vines that always emerged from the earth were for the first time stronger than it was. What had been an apex predator in the golden rings was suddenly reduced to prey in this more powerful ecosystem. The hierarchy that had seemed absolute for the cat was revealed to be merely local. The beast roared, but it was no longer the sound of a confident bully. It was the cry of prey realizing too late that it had entered the territory of something more dangerous than itself. The struggle that followed was brutally unequal. The cat was fast, strong, and had all the experience of a third golden ring predator. But the platinum sprouts operated on a completely different level and hunted in a huge group. More tentacles emerged with each second, creating an increasingly dense network around the trapped creature. They really work as a network, Xiao realized, observing from a safe distance in the heights while activating his silent flight. In the distance, barely visible now through the saturated air, rose structures that made the previous trees look like dwarfs. It seemed there were very few now, in much more cleared spaces. But now he could see there was something much more complex than the simple distribution of new space. These were assemblies of golden noses that had evolved in symbiosis with the platinum sprouts. The massive trees, now taller and thicker, had hundreds of platinum sprouts connected like an extended root system. They shared energy, information, resources. The playful cat wasn't being hunted by a single plant. It was being buried as fertilizer for an entire ecosystem. The scale of cooperation was staggering. Each tree represented not just a single evolved creature, but a central processing unit for hundreds of subsidiary organisms. The entire visible landscape was revealed to be a single, vast, distributed intelligence for a single tree. The feline's roars became more desperate as more tentacles joined the constrictive embrace. Its strength, which had been dominant in the Golden Ring, was insufficient against the combined power of hundreds of plant predators working in unison. It wasn't fast or strong enough to escape, Xiao murmured, feeling a strange blend of pity and relief. The cat that had pursued him with implacable determination was now being dragged inexorably toward what appeared to be a communal mouth, a convergence of tentacles that opened and closed with a somewhat hypnotic digestive rhythm. Soon it would be nothing more than mana nutrients for the vast organism that had claimed it. Xiao took advantage of the distraction to put distance between himself and the feeding site. His flight was slightly heavier in the dense air, each silent beat of his wings generating more energy than he was accustomed to controlling. And this is just the beginning, he reminded himself, thinking of the 2 platinum rings he still had to cross before reaching the territory where the king might be. Fortunately, the skies seemed less populated than the ground. The sporadic white camouflage creatures that inhabited the airspace of the first platinum ring apparently hadn't been interested in a small traveler moving almost invisibly with his stealth and a miserable mana signature by local standards. Maybe he was well hidden, or maybe they simply didn't consider something of his quality as a threat or worthy prey. Xiao would realize his assumption was wrong. The first platinum ring stretched before him like a bigger-than-expected ocean of platinum nightmare sprouts. He had flown for hours, each kilometer more exhausting than the last. The dense air had become worse, and the mana accumulated in his lungs created a constant choking sensation that was beginning to require small doses of medicine to alleviate and move freely. "This is taking longer than expected," he murmured, observing the horizon. The scale was overwhelming. The golden rings, which he had thought were enormous, seemed like private gardens compared to this. The platinum territory extended in all directions like its own entire world. If this was only the first of 3 platinum rings, how vast was the territory he still had to cross? How many more impossible challenges lay ahead? And the creatures. Xiao had managed to avoid terrestrial predators by staying in the air, but soon realized that the sky wasn't the all-safe refuge he had hoped for. A network of flying cats patrolled the airspace in the fence where the density of trees was greater to pass to the next ring. It seemed that the dense mana in the vicinity of Platinum 2 could feed more trees, so they were no longer so scarce. The problem with the fence were its inhabitants that moved constantly flying between the trees. Not exactly flyers, he corrected himself, observing their movement patterns. Gliders. The felines had developed extensive membranes between their extremities, allowing them to glide enormous distances between the massive trees. But what really made them dangerous was their constant attention, their eyes continuously scanning the air for their favorite prey. Drill moths. The ecosystem became clear when Xiao saw the first moth being intercepted. The creature was the size of a small house, with wings that generated camouflage similar to his raptor's scales and an extendable drill that protruded from its head like a living spear. It had emerged from the right side of the territory, flying from a completely different ecosystem separated by a giant lake that stretched as far as the eye could see. Born from golden wood larvae, expelled from the earth by deep nightmares, and expelled from the sky by fire wyverns in the skies of that place. They found their only viable food source drilling the enormous trunks of the platinum noses. The moths were refugees in their own ecosystem, creatures displaced by forces too effective against them to resist. Their entire existence had become a desperate search for resources that could help them evolve without attracting the attention of other predators. That lake, Xiao murmured, analyzing its enormity, begins in Gold Ring 2 on the right side of Yano's triangle and occupies a third of the territory. The geography was simple if one took the fundamental divisions as reference. The world was thought to be divided into four by the two great chasms, and Yano occupied a quarter, one of the pieces of that division. The lake occupying a third of that space was so massive it completely redefined the ecology of the region. The moth tried to reach one of the now lush massive trees, its drill spinning with accumulated energy. Xiao could see its objective, the center of the trunk, where mana concentrated like liquid sap. But before it could get close, 3 flying cats launched from different directions. The way the platinum cats, 5 times larger, tore it apart was spectacular and brutal. The moth fought valiantly, its drill cutting one of them. But the cats had perfected this hunt. They worked in coordination, one on each wing, while dominating and separating the creature together. Each cat knew exactly what role to play. The moth, despite its size and weapons, never had a real chance. When it was over, the cats threw the remains toward the base of the tree, and at the top they were rewarded with small, dense mana fruits that detached like payment for their services. Total symbiosis, Xiao realized. The trees now pay the cats to protect them, and the sprouts share food with the tree. The 3 creatures that were previously fighting to live now lived in harmony against the moths. The problem was that, from a distance, Xiao probably looked exactly like a camouflage moth until they were close. His size wasn't similar, his flight had a different pattern, but the cats, as he had experienced, would hunt anything smaller than them that moved, and his direction of travel led him directly toward the fence of massive trees. Chapter 478, Taming the Platinum Ring 2. For the flying cats, Xiao would simply be another threat to eliminate. I need to find a gap in their coverage, he murmured, studying the patrol patterns. But the more he observed, the more he realized there were no gaps. The cats had established a surveillance network that covered every cubic meter of airspace. It was a system refined by centuries of war against invading moths. Each cat maintained perfect spacing from its neighbors, their patrol routes overlapping in ways that ensured no intruder could slip through undetected. Xiao tried flying lower, but the platinum sprout's tentacles rose immediately, sensitive to any movement in their aerial domain. He tried flying higher than the canopy, but the air became so thin due to the insane altitude of the gigantic trees that he could barely stay airborne. And all the time, mana accumulated in his system. His medicine worked, but it wasn't perfect. Each breath brought more energy than he could process, and his internal filters were beginning to saturate. He could feel the growing pressure, the sensation of being filled with liquid mana. The buildup was subtle, like slowly drowning in power. Hours later, his vision began to take on a crystalline quality at the edges, and his movements became sluggish as his nervous system struggled to process the energy overload. He could drink more, but then it wouldn't be enough for the full trip. This isn't going to work, he finally admitted, feeling how his vision was beginning to glow at the edges. The retreat was humiliating but necessary. Xiao turned around, flying back toward the golden ring while fighting against depression. Each meter he retreated felt like a betrayal of his mission, but the alternative was dying from wandering in circles. In that place, he couldn't stay too long, or he'd die from mana saturation before even reaching the second platinum ring. And there are 3 rings of this, he murmured, processing the information he had gathered during his failed exploration. The second platinum ring, visible in the distance behind the fence, showed an even greater fusion between the trees and sprouts. Now massive vines covered the trees, transforming them into gigantic structures that moved with an impetus now more animal than plant, creating mobile giants that hid the cats within their living architecture. What had been separate organisms in the golden rings had become components of larger beings, each tree now a living fortress that could relocate itself as needed. And beyond, he knew from Victor's information that the third platinum ring appeared to be a relatively normal forest until you realized that each enormous trunk was actually a hardened platinum sprout, and what appeared to be multiple trees in a huge forest was actually a single massive organism. A vegetation dragon, he had murmured, finally understanding the scale of what he was facing. The dragon tree dominated the entire third ring, having defeated all other competing trees during decades of territorial war. It was the guardian of the crystalline mountain, destined to protect it for 100 years before evolving and ascending to the diamond ring, leaving the mountain for a new dragon to keep. And our king is there, Xiao told himself, flying back toward the more breathable air of golden territory, fighting that thing. When he finally landed in the Gold Ring 3 clearing, the claw tree was still there, guarding its secrets. Xiao allowed himself a moment of despair. He had crashed against a wall of reality he couldn't penetrate. His level was simply insufficient to navigate the platinum rings. No matter how perfect his stealth was, it wouldn't be better than that of the platinum moths. Silver 3 in platinum territory, he murmured, laughing bitterly. What was I thinking? But while processing his failure, a part of him, the part that had listened to Ren's interesting solutions for certain situations with pleasure, began looking for alternatives. The king's trail continued toward the platinum rings. That was undeniable. He had to find a way to reach him. Xiao stopped abruptly, a realization hitting him like a fist. Wait, he murmured, instinctively touching where his camouflage raptor resided within him. Today is the day. With all the chaos of the mission, the constant danger, and the pressure of finding the king, he had completely forgotten that his raptor was scheduled to evolve to Bronze 1 today, according to Ren's 100 days. The timing couldn't be worse, or maybe better, depending on how you looked at it. The beast was iron, so it gets 8 incorrect cultivation points per day in gold, 16 wrong points per day in platinum. Ren had told him it had a limit of 1,000. If you're in places with too much mana, the boy had said with that seriousness that looked comical in someone of his age, incorrect cultivation will ruin your beast's future. But if it levels up, the incorrect base resets to 0 1,000ths. In theory, you should rise to bronze before spending more than 100 days in the platinum ring, or you won't be able to cultivate in time. If the mana doesn't kill you, of course. Let's hope you don't need to live there soon. But why did he need to ask that weirdly specific question? Xiao had registered the information at the time, but hadn't anticipated he would actually use it. At least I managed to evolve, he murmured, feeling the changes begin in his system as he absorbed the last pre-processed crystal. I suppose, then, that the incorrect accumulator didn't fill up, and if the boy is correct, as always, I can continue cultivating because it has returned to 0 and will charge slower now. The evolution was also more beneficial than he expected. His missed owl had been the one carrying almost the whole burden of the journey, and its 1,000-day method hadn't started, yet a method too costly at Silver 3 rank to waste when he wasn't sure he could complete properly. Although he had most of the necessary materials thanks to Julius, the length of the process had made him hesitate, and he had been right not to start it. Lin would finish her evolution before him, a reality that filled him with professional envy. Although he didn't know Lin would also need to restart her method later. Anyway, the raptor was different. Its evolution was still the main line and had to be priority, the 100 crystals taken in precise doses for at least 100 days according to Ren. And although this main method could be interrupted without too much problem while still saving the accumulation unlike the 1,000-day one. Incorrect accumulation wasn't a problem for the 1,000-day maturation one. Both had pros and cons. Xiao felt the change flowing through his system, his body adapting to his beast's new capabilities. The camouflage became more refined, more intuitive. His muscles gained density without losing flexibility. His reflexes sharpened a bit more, and the mana in this zone began to bother him a little less. Bronze 1, he whispered, feeling the power settle into his bones. Finally, the improvement for only the raptor was considerable. Although combined with the owl's increases, it remained smaller. It was while getting used to his new capabilities that he began to think more positively, more like Run. It's not about being stronger, he murmured. It's about understanding better. Chapter 479, Taming the Platinum Ring 3. Xiao observed his surroundings with new eyes. The clearing, the medicinal grass, the carrion sprouts waiting patiently beneath the surface, the claw tree guarding its secrets in an almost closed hand. What would you do here, boy? Xiao asked aloud, studying the landscape with a new perspective. The answer came gradually, like pieces of a puzzle fitting into place. It wasn't about brute force or perfect stealth. It was about understanding the ecosystem well enough to become part of it. Xiao thought about his options. The underground route was even worse than the sky. He had considered entering the tunnels in previous rings for barely a few minutes before completely discarding the idea. There are 200 meters in silver, 350 meters depth from gold rank, and 500 meters in platinum, from which 50 meters would be dominated by beasts of the same rank as those on the surface. The underground had some residual mana from the surface before reducing the mana level to 0 for around 100 meters and recovering it again, doubled every 25 meters in depth. All those beasts, before resurging to the surface, would be specialized in vibrations. Without earth beasts of his own, every step he took would be like ringing a giant bell announcing his presence. The gold sprouts had already been dangerous, and dealing with the platinum version for the last 150 meters to the surface in Platinum 3 would be suicide. The gold sprouts will detect me even before I reach 300 meters, he murmured, discarding the underground route. Worse than the sky. He found himself sitting in the clearing next to the claw tree, observing the medicinal grass growing on the giant corpse. His mind spun, searching for options that simply didn't exist. What would Rin do? He asked aloud. The boy always found solutions that, after analyzing them, were simple and based on the natural characteristics of beasts. Like the cat-bear scent to confuse the golden noses. Like using knowledge of attack patterns to defeat stronger opponents. The flying cats attacked moths because moths threatened the trees. But if something didn't smell like a moth, if something smelled like something the cats instinctively avoided. When you can't find the solution to the problem, he murmured, the problem isn't how you're seeing things. Xiao looked at the medicinal grass with new eyes. The smell had repelled the playful cat in the golden ring. But would it work against the flying cats of the platinum ring? There was only one way to find out. Completely crazy, he murmured as he began harvesting much more grass than he already carried in his backpack. But all the best ideas seem like that first, right? Covering himself completely with medicinal grass was a somewhat uncomfortable experience for flying. Xiao even crushed leaves until he created a thick paste that he applied to every centimeter of his exposed skin. The smell was overwhelming, medicinal, but with a bitter undertone that made his eyes water. His mist owl, fused with him, protested with nauseous sensations he had to forcibly suppress. The process was thorough and disgusting. He worked the paste into his hair, under his fingernails, even inside his mouth to ensure the scent permeated every part of his being. By the time he finished, he looked like he had been dipped in green mud and smelled like a walking pharmacy. If this doesn't work, he murmured while applying the last layer, I'm going to be the worst-smelling scout who was ever devoured by giant cats. The flight back to the Platinum Ring was an exercise in blind faith. Xiao forced himself to maintain a direct flight pattern toward the massive trees, resisting every instinct that screamed at him to hide or flee. The flying cats detected him immediately. He had counted on that. 3 felines approached from different directions, their forms cutting through the air with deadly grace. Xiao maintained his course, his heart hammering against his ribs. The first cat was a magnificent specimen, its membrane wings spanning at least 20 meters each, its muscular frame radiating power. Its eyes locked onto Xiao with the focused intensity of a creature that had never failed to catch its prey. The cat closed the distance, its flight path planned to intercept Xiao's trajectory perfectly. Xiao could see the intelligence in its movements, the way it anticipated his possible evasive maneuvers. 50 meters, 40, 30. Xiao's hands trembled as he fought the urge to dive away from the approaching predator. Every fiber of his being screamed warnings about the claws he could now see gleaming in the platinum light, the powerful jaw that could snap him in half without effort. 20 meters. The cat's nostrils flared as it caught his scent. The change was instantaneous and dramatic. The predator's confident approach transformed into recoiling revulsion. Its wings beat frantically as it pulled back, its face contorting into an expression of such profound disgust that it was almost comical. The cat let out a sound that was part hiss, part gag, and wheeled away so abruptly that it nearly collided with the second approaching feline. The second cat, seeing its companion's reaction, slowed its approach but continued forward with cautious curiosity. It got within 15 meters before the smell hit it fully, and its reaction was even more violent. The creature performed what could only be described as an aerial retch, spinning away while making distress sounds that echoed through the air. The third cat, witnessing the fate of its companions, performed a wide circle around Xiao, testing the air currents. When a downdraft carried his scent upward, the cat immediately climbed higher, clearly determined to avoid whatever had caused such revulsion in the others. It works, Xiao whispered, barely able to believe his success. It really works. He flew through the cat's surveillance network as if he were untouchable, protected by nothing more than medicinal grass and the understanding that sometimes the simplest solutions were the most effective. The passage through their territory became almost surreal. Cats that had seemed determined to intercept him now actively avoided his flight path, creating gaps in their formation that allowed him to pass unchallenged. Some even fled to higher altitudes, abandoning their patrol routes entirely rather than risk exposure to his overwhelming stench. As he approached the boundary to the second Platinum Ring, Xiao couldn't help but smiled despite his exhaustion and the awesome smell surrounding him. Run, he murmured with genuine appreciation. I'm definitely going to brag about this when I get back. Chapter 480, Taming the Platinum Ring 4. The second Platinum Ring turned out to be easier for completely different reasons than expected. Xiao had expected to have to dodge the mobile creatures of the vine forest, but soon realized the beasts were too busy fighting each other to pay him any attention. The ecosystem was in an intense warfare. The dragon egg, symbiotic fusions between trees, animals, and sprouts looked like mountains constantly crashing against each other, living structures fighting for some reason. The conflict was brutal, each representing a different strategy for dominating the new mana concentration place. Xiao flew between epic battles, observing how they struck and confronted each other, affecting control over mana intersections. Victory meant access to prime mana nodes. Defeat meant stagnation and longer waits again. It's really like flying through a war zone, he murmured, dodging shrapnel from spine projection that had been aimed from one competitor to another. The creatures were so aggressive with each other that a small intruder simply didn't register as existing. Xiao took advantage of the chaos, flying uninterrupted while staying as far away from conflicts as possible. The battles were too focused, too intense for the combatants to spare attention for anything that wasn't an immediate threat to their new territorial claims. Xiao was beneath their notice, a gnat flying through a battlefield of titans. The journey through the second ring took hours, but was notably less stressful than the first. His only challenge was navigating around battles without getting caught in crossfire. The third platinum ring was also abnormal as it greeted him with disturbing silence. Xiao had spent an entire day flying, consuming medicine against mana excess with increasing frequency. Fortunately, he had a ton of filled flasks and plenty of leaves for later. As he advanced, he found a desolate landscape, where there should have been a forest of powerful, crystallized sprouts. Now, there was almost nothing. Broken structures rose like broken teeth from the ground, the remains of what had once been a forest representing the mountain guardian's power. The devastation was recent. Xiao could see where massive root systems had been torn from the earth, leaving crater-like wounds in the landscape. Crystallized bark lay scattered like fallen monuments, each piece large enough to serve as a building foundation. "What kind of battle was this?" he murmured, flying through the enormous, devastated landscape. The answer came when he finally saw the mountain. The crystalline structure rose in the distance, giant and imposing, but what caught his attention was what lay at its feet. A massive corpse, so large he had confused its contours with landscape features. The dragon tree. The creature that had dominated an entire ring lay broken and still, its form so immense that Xiao had to be flying just to take in its full scope. This hadn't been just a tree. It had been a living mountain, a creature whose death had reshaped the entire ecosystem. Fortunately, they hadn't moved far from the epicenter during the end of the battle, Xiao whispered, heading toward the devastation zone. The battlefield was a testament to the power that had been unleashed. Xiao flew over craters that could have contained small lakes, over shattered stones, over thousands of broken bodies of crystallized wood warriors that had been the fallen dragon soldiers. Each crater told part of the story. Here, a massive impact where the dragon had been driven to the ground. There, a series of parallel gouges where claws had raked across the landscape. Everywhere, the scattered remains of wooden soldiers that had been caught in the crossfire of a battle between titans. The marks on the terrain told the story of an epic struggle. Xiao followed the destruction patterns, reading the battle like a map until he finally found what he was looking for. Among the rubble of rock and hardened, crystallized wood, barely visible under a pile of debris, was a human form. "Your Majesty!" Xiao shouted, diving toward the spot. Dragarian was alive, but barely. His breathing was labored. His skin had a bluish tint that Xiao immediately recognized as extreme mana saturation. The king had pushed his system beyond all limits, and his mana circulatory system was paying the price. The sight was shocking. This was the strongest man of the world who had commanded the respect of entire kingdoms, now reduced to barely clinging to consciousness beneath a pile of rubble. "Yano," the king's voice was barely a whisper. "Ow!" Message from Julius. Xiao explained quickly while pulling out one of his mana potions. "We need you to return immediately. The political situation is critical." He poured the medicine onto the king's lips, watching with relief as color gradually returned to his face. The medicine was working, but the damage was extensive. Julius was always the dramatic one. Dragarian murmured, barely awake, but gratitude could be caught in his faint voice. "Though I suppose I should thank the timing." It was then that the ground began to tremble. Xiao lifted the king, who couldn't even stand, just as the first roots emerged beneath the dragon tree's corpse. But these weren't normal Platinum 3 roots. They were massive sprouts, pulsing with life not yet crystallized. The new dragon would not wait any time until the previous guardian was mourned. Now, it was claiming its prize and its territory. "Damned opportunists," Dragarian murmured, but his voice carried more fascination than fear. "Seems the replacement battle just barely concluded. You have great courage, but more than anything, incredible timing, still." The dragon's corpse began to sink, pulled by the new tenant. Where the old dragon had been, a new one was about to take its place. The new one would consume the remains of the previous one, transforming faster than normal. An endless cycle of succession that ensured the mountain's protection. I see why it cost me so much to bring this one down. So it was about to become Diamond One. The new dragon, Xiao shouted as he realized what was happening. It's taking its place now, and it's going to close the mountain when it evolves with the crystallized wood resonance, Dragarian added, pointing with his eyes toward the crystalline structure. We have maybe 15 seconds before it seals the entrance for the next 100 years of its development. There was no time for detailed explanations. If they didn't want to have to defeat a new dragon, they had to move now. Xiao grabbed the still-weakened king, activated all the flight power he had, and launched toward the crystalline mountain entrance while the world transformed around them. The forest grew with speed that defied nature, building-sized tentacles rising from the ground, branches blocking the sky, a new ecosystem being born in real time, feeding on the abundant mana. The sight was like watching creation compressed into moments. What should have taken decades was happening in seconds, driven by the concentrated power released from the fallen guardian's corpse. The mountain entrance grew smaller with each second. Faster, Dragarian urged, though he himself was too weakened to help. Xiao pushed his flight beyond all limits, consuming the last reserves of mana in a final sprint toward salvation. The mountain opening closed behind them just as they crossed the threshold, sealing them inside. In the crystalline darkness that followed, Xiao finally allowed himself to collapse. His mission completed, but his escape now impossible without the help of his rescued charge's power. He had found the king. Now he just had to find a way to get him back. The king collapsed as soon as they had found a safe place inside the crystalline mountain. Xiao caught him again before he hit the ground, immediately feeling how fragile the most powerful man in the kingdom had become. Dragarian had been running on pure willpower before his rescue, but now that he had found salvation, his body finally yielded to extreme exhaustion. The contrast was stark and sobering. The man who had single-handedly ended a dragon, the magnitude of his recent battle, and the toll that such power exacted on its wielder. "Your Majesty," Xiao murmured, checking the king's pulse. "Weak but steady. Just rest. I'll keep watch." The crystalline mountain rose around them like a cathedral of gems, its walls radiating soft light that eliminated the need for torches. But that same light confirmed what Xiao had feared. The walls were of a density that defied his understanding. Even with his evolved raptor, he had no hope of penetrating them. The crystal formations were beautiful. Each surface seemed to absorb and refract light in patterns that suggested a structure far more complex than simple stone. This wasn't just a mountain, it was a vast crystalline castle, and they were trapped within its body. They were trapped until the king recovered from his exhaustion enough to use his power. But even considering the king's powerful regeneration, those wounds and damage to his energy system, several days, Xiao estimated, mentally calculating the king's reserves. Maybe a few weeks. They had limited supplies, no way to communicate with the outside world, and no guarantee that Dragarian would recover quickly enough to prevent whatever political crisis had prompted this desperate rescue mission. Xiao settled in for a long wait, his successful mission now transformed into a different kind of challenge entirely. Finding the king had been the easy part. Surviving long enough to return him to his kingdom might prove to be the real test.